Now we just need to do a few more things to finish the server part of the chat system. And the first thing I'm going to do is I was a little inconsistent when I named these events. Um, so let me define a message as being either somebody joining or posting a message or leaving the chat. And then a post is just when they add a line to the chat. So I'm going to call this a message instead, and I'll call that a message. And I don't think that should cause any problems because that's the only place I'm using those events right now. So let me go ahead and restart the server and test it out, make sure it still works. So here's the server, and let me start a client for Cindy, and client for Alice, and a client for Bob. And then Bob will post a test, and everybody got that line, and Alice will post a response. And everybody got that line. So that's working fine. Now what I need to change is what happens when somebody exits the chat, and what happens when somebody joins the chat. So I want to create a new message from the chat when the join occurs. So in my client, basically as soon as I get this connection, so I connect here, the first thing I want to do is send a message. And let's just go ahead and socket.write json.stringify. And then it's going to include the name. And then the type is going to be join. And there is no line or anything else. And then I need to add a \n because I'm doing line oriented. And that should be it for the join over here. So let me go ahead and, oh, actually, let me restart Alice and restart Bob. And when I restarted Bob, I got a message here that Bob joined, and a message here that Bob joined. And I also got a message on Cindy, who is waiting, that Bob joined. Now, before I can exit, I have to have some way of getting an exit event. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen directly to the keyboard for an escape event when the user presses the escape key. And right now I can Control-C twice to get out of here. But this will be a little cleaner for now. So this process.standardin that I'm using with my line reader also just emits regular events. So let's look at the process.standardin. So let's look for process.standardin, and it looks like it's going to be on key press. So let's give that a shot here. So we're going to do process.standardin.on key press event. And for now, we'll just console.log the key. And then let me go ahead and start up Alice. That's the server. So here's Alice. And then I'm going to type an escape key and see if I get anything. So I got undefined. So I'm getting the event, but I'm not getting the key correctly. So let's actually go ahead and look at it. So it's the second argument. The first thing is a chunk and the second is the key. So let me go ahead and try that. And I'm going to start Alice again. There's my escape. So it's going to be a key object with a name property, which is escape. And so let me Control C. That's what a Control C looks like, by the way. It's a name C with Control true. So in my standard on key press, I'm going to say if key.name is escape, then I'm going to socket.write a new message, and the type is leave. Guess I should use double quotes here to be consistent. So let's go ahead and see what that does. So there's Alice and there's Bob. Alice, Bob, and then Alice is going to leave, and that generated a leave message, but I'm not actually doing anything after that, so I have to also cause Alice to exit. Okay. So after I've sent the message, I'm going to close the socket. And that should be enough to exit out of all of these listeners. I might want to call process.exit or just exit. Okay, so actually close is not a function because they generate end events. So let's just exit. Okay, so escape, and we wrote our leave, and then we exited. Okay, so now let's clean up the chat display a little bit by formatting those messages that we're receiving, and that's going to happen in the client when we get a line from the socket. So instead of just console.logging this, we're going to go ahead and const message is equal to json.parse line. And then we have a different action for each type of message. So we could have a type join or a type post. Or a type leave. Yeah. So join, post, or leave. So I'm going to use a switch statement for that. So switch on message.type case join, and then case post, and then case leave. So on a join, I'm going to write, well, let's create a function that will display this date in a reasonable time. But first, I'm just going to write it as second since epoch, just as a placeholder. So console.log, let's start with the time. And then the name, plus colon \n. And then let's use a template here. So we'll do some number signs, and then fill in the blank with message.name as join the chat. And then a blank line after the message. So that's my join, and then leave is going to look exactly the same, except this is going to be has left the chat. And then for post, I'm not going to have those lines. I'm just going to have message.line plus \n. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So maybe only one new line here. Yeah, so console.log actually adds a new line, so I don't need another one, and only need one additional here. And I could pull this into a helper function, so I'll do that in the real system, but this one I'm just sort of demonstrating the real client. Okay, so that looks a little better. And then here, Bob. And then Bob will say, hello, how are you? And then Alice will say, I'm fine, and you? So right now it's mixing the things that I type. They're getting mixed in with the display of the messages that are coming from the chat server. In the real system, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a user interface that lets me keep a separate text area for the chat messages and an area for a text box where I can type the chat line in so that things don't get mixed up. And I'll also color these pieces of text here so that it's easier to see what the messages are that I sent and the messages that other people sent. So the bottom line is the mechanics are all working here, but the user interface needs to be cleaned up. The only thing I'm going to do right now, though, is I'm going to go ahead and process this date into something that looks a little bit better. So let me go ahead and exit both of these. And then to format the date, I'm going to create a helper function called, I'll create a helper function called format date. And in the real system, these will be methods on a class. So I'm going to wrap both the server code and the client code into a class. So that's going to take a time argument. And going to const date is new date time. And then I can return a templated string. So the first thing I want is date.month slash date.get. It's either day or date. I think it's date. Let's go ahead and give that one a shot. And then date.getYear. And I need to close those off. And I might need to add ones to these as well, because some of these are 0 offset. Like I think the month goes from 0 to 11 instead of 1 to 12. And then let's do date.hour colon date.get minutes colon date.get seconds and this isn't right yet, but let's go ahead and see what it looks like and then we can fix it. And then the big thing that isn't right about this as well is some of these will be single digits. So I'm going to have to pad out with zeros for minutes and seconds. But for now, let's go ahead and just check our display so far. So this is going to be format date of message.time. Okay, and then let's look at it. Okay, so years are not correct. Actually, this should be year. I'm not sure what did I use here. So month plus 1. Date is correct. Year is 1900 plus that. And then for time, let's try it again. So 2:42 a.m. So 2:42 is about right, and 16 seconds is about right. So all I have to do is make sure that I do the right thing if there's only one character here. So let's have another helper function called pad. And to pad out with zeros, the easy way to do it is to return 0 plus n, And that will either give, if n is a single digit, this will give 2 digits. If n is 2 digits, this will give 3 digits. So I slice off the last 2 characters. And then here I'm going to pad 2 of minutes and seconds. And this is long, so let's reformat this a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and break that up to there. And then add that. And I need a space here to separate. Okay, so that should be it. Let's go ahead and run it. So these dates look good. And 244. And that should be 0. Whoop. There. And the padding is working correctly. And then we'll just let it get up to 10 seconds. Okay, so just a couple of cleanup things. So the first thing is I want to handle Control C in addition to escape. So if key.name is escape or key.name is equal to C and key.control equal true, I think it was key.control. Then I'm going to do that. So let's go ahead and try that. Oops, I need to run it from here. So when control. No, I don't think it was control. Let me see if I have it in my scroll back buffer. CTRL. CTRL. And then let's try that. Control works. So let's do Bob is, yeah, Alice has left the chat. So let's join. Alice has joined the chat. Alice has left the chat. And escape still works. Good. Okay. The other thing was I cheated a little bit and I looked online while I was editing the video. And so this get year here, that's actually deprecated. You should use get full year, and then you don't have to add 1900 to it. So let's go ahead and try that. Should work exactly the same. So it still says 2020. That's good. And Control C. Yep. All right, so that's working. And then somewhere I lost the colon after the name when I was writing these chat messages. So I actually wanted plus colon here. And that should work. Okay, so there's a colon. And then the last thing is over here in my server. So when the client disconnects, right now I still have this listener going on. So there's still a client listening for messages from the chat emitter, even though the client and its socket have gone away. And I don't really want that. So I want to do here, when the user exits. So here, when I get a message that the client is exiting or leaving, I want to remove this handler. So here's the handler that responds to the chat emitter messages. And I want to remove that from this event so that the client isn't notified anymore. And to do that, I actually have to save this function somewhere because it's one of the parameters that you pass into remove. So I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to go ahead and define it up here. So that's going to be const handler is that thing. And then here I'm going to add handler. And then when I get this message here, after I've emitted it, I'm going to say if message.type is leave, then I'm going to chat emitter.remove message comma handler. So remove listener. So let's go ahead and try that. And here's Alice. And here's Bob. Hello. Goodbye. And then escape. Good. Okay, so that worked. And Bob has left the chat. And Alice has left the chat. So that's everything but a fancy interface.